outside.
than I would.
Yeah. I would miss the fog.
The natural air conditioning that you get on the summer days. And I was stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey for 3 years in the military. So same kind of feel, right? As San Francisco. I mean, very, very different, but fog would roll in. Yeah, no, it'd be. And so I miss those parts of the Bay Area. But then, although this morning's commute was terrible in here, we always say, Omaha's a great place because the traffic and the commute's not bad. But this morning, drivers, because it rained, people are acting like it was snow. Everybody's driving slow, and there's like the arteries to get this way across town where all of them were jammed. Really? So no matter what you did, we were all late. It was. So it happens in Omaha too. Okay, let me adjust this camera. I'm actually going to move you a little bit closer if we could. Don't have to look at the camera.
Okay.
We'll look at each other during the interview. I will look at the camera and say, welcome to the bonus content coverage for Heartland Developer Conference 2018. We've been doing these for the last 2 days now. I'm here with Audrey Crane. Audrey, welcome to the conference.
Thanks.
Let's get to know you a little bit about you. Your bio's out there so folks can look at it, but let's get to know you. Where you're from, what you do, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I'm from San Francisco. I'm a partner at a design firm, so Design Map. We design software for our clients. We're pretty focused on B2B stuff, but we do some B2C and healthcare and finance, stuff like that. And we do a lot of work in Omaha. I have lots of reasons for wanting to be in Omaha, but we had a great client in Indianapolis for years and years and grew to really love working with folks in the Midwest and on software in the Midwest. So
Indianapolis and Omaha are very similar in a lot of ways, much bigger, but very similar towns.
Yeah, we noticed, it's funny, our client in Indianapolis, I won't name names, but they're so sweet and amazingly successful business. And they had a great exit, multi-billion-dollar exit with a huge company in the Bay Area. And we noticed that people started interrupting each other after the acquisition and after they were spending more time getting integrated. Nothing against either company, but we have enjoyed working out here with Team and ES&S and think.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we think Omaha is the best kept secret in America as a place to live and a place to work. We have access to everything. We still have all the same stores, Targets and Walmarts and whatever. Good dining. In fact, I think per capita restaurants, Omaha owns it for the most, which we have tons of places to eat.
There's great places, and most Fortune 500 companies per capita as well.
Yeah, and Warren Buffett. It's pretty great. So welcome to Omaha, or welcome back to Omaha. Glad that you're here. Tell us a little bit about your keynote. You were the morning keynote.
Yep.
Like, if there was one thing you were hoping to get through to them in the keynote, by the way, you had the most questions I've seen yet after a keynote. So nicely done.
Oh, they hated me.
No, they wouldn't. Nobody would. They were too polite to ask questions publicly, but afterwards I couldn't get to you. But what were you hoping to get across in your keynote?
Yeah, so I see a lot of companies that invest a ton in engineering, and a lot of engineers that personally invest a ton in writing code. Their blood, sweat, and tears go into building this stuff. But then the user experience, the interface through which users interact with what they're building is bad. It's often there are not people even assigned to do that. It's either product managers, the engineers. It's certainly not people who are trained and dedicated and as passionate about making a great user experience as the developers making the stuff underneath it. And so what I was really hoping to drive home with them was, look, you deserve to have a great user experience, to have the things that you're building validated with users before you invest a ton of time in them, and to have those products be as profitable as possible. And if you don't have it, either because there aren't people with that title or those skills at your company, or they're too thinly stretched, you should demand it. And there's a personal kind of like your heart at stake, because it's what you're putting into your work. There's also, there's plenty of business case to support that. So I hope a couple people do that.
Yeah, good. I work in for Gallup. One of the things I do is manage a lot of the feedback we get from our large coaching community. And I get feedback sometimes on design that's contradictory. In other words, if we just listen to the users, sometimes some will say, I want it this way, and others will say, I want it that way. How do you start, or when we think about design, because it can't be You're never going to please 100% of the people all the time. And
Sure.
sometimes beauty is in the eye, or functionality is in the eye of the beholder. When you start approaching that, how do you approach it from knowing you're not going to hit that 100% target every time? And what are some structures to start with that gets us all on the same page?
Yeah.
I know that's a gigantic question, but
it's not a small, non-trivial question.
Yeah.
But two things come to mind for me. So one is they're sort of from the bottom up and then top down. So if you're getting feedback and people are saying, I really want this button to be red, it should be red. I don't know why it's blue. It's ridiculous. It should be red. What they're really saying is probably not, I want it to be red. What they're saying is, I keep having to retrain people on how to do this because they can't remember that the next thing that they're supposed to do is hit this button. And so by asking a few probing questions, we can get to what they're trying to accomplish. And at the root of what might be different feedback, where one person is saying this should go on a different page and somebody else is saying this should be red and somebody else is saying this information should be available here, by asking just a couple of probing questions, we might find that at the root of them, they have something in common. They have a common thread. And then the designer's job is to say, okay, understanding this common thread of a problem, what's the best way to solve it? Maybe it's make it red. Maybe it's put on maybe it's something else. So taking it at face, it's very difficult for a user, a quote unquote user, like a person show up and say, I want to be really clear with you that my goal is to accomplish this and I'm being stymied for these reasons. They just come and they say it should be red. So that's kind of a top-down way to look at it. And then from the bottom up, one of the things that we do is we talk to users, and before we build something, we talk to users and we really get into who are they, what's motivating them at heart, what's keeping them up at night when they think about their job, where do they want to be in 3 years, when they had such a great day that they came home and they couldn't wait to tell their wife or their partner or their cat about you won't believe this great day. Like, what happened that day? And how can we make more of those days for them? How can we help them sleep at night? So we talk to a bunch of people, not a bunch, 20, 30 people, it depends.
Yeah.
And then we organize those into patterns of behavior and motivations. And those are archetypal users that we call personas, right? And part of the hard work of the product manager is to identify the primary persona and to say, like you said, we can't be all things to all people. And if we try to do that, we're going to fail. What was that car that was like a passenger car in the front and then on the back of it had a pickup? Yeah. Like that
car
was
in the front, truck in the back.
in the market, right?
Right.
What was successful, what came right after that was a Ford F-150. Now, Ford F-150 is not all things to all people, and it leaves out a huge portion of the market. But you know what? It's a massive success. Yeah. And part of the work behind that Ford F-150 was this persona work, was understanding different people, saying for right now, for this release or this car or whatever, it's not that we don't want anybody else to buy it, but we're going to really focus on meeting this person's needs a million times better than anybody else does.
Yeah.
And so those two things are ways I think about that problem.
Sure. And that always begs the question, is design art or is it science?
It's not art. It's bounded problem solving. One thing that designers really like is the boundaries around the work that you're doing, and that's where the fun is. And we're also doing it for other people, whereas art, not always, but maybe more for ourselves.
When we think about that user experience, the page view or on the phone, an experience on the phone, and we're thinking about what makes that user successful, what usually from a metric standpoint or from a measurement standpoint, how do we know they're being successful? How do you know you're getting the right user experience beyond just asking them? I mean, can that scale out to thousands of users or hundreds of thousands?
Yes,
okay.
Of course. So, I mean, you guys are like the kings of that, right?
We do.
But there's quantitative and there's qualitative, right? And quantitative is great at asking a question, what is happening? And so we should use that. We should instrument to understand what is happening. And then we complement that with the qualitative, which helps us answer the question, why is that happening? And qualitative can also help us answer the question, how might we solve for it? And so the challenge, most companies are really comfortable with one or really comfortable with the other, but there's such strength in putting those two things together So it takes, that instrumentation and the legwork often on the part of the marketing team to get that quant, but then it also takes working closely with the people doing the qualitative and not having a quant bias. Like there's a woman named Trisha Wing who's has a great TED Talk about quant bias. And so mirroring those things together is really important. She tells a story of how Samsung basically missed the boat because of their quant bias.
Sure. Is that the same thing as kind of the bubble effect? In other words, we start a group think and we start all thinking the same thing. And so we only hear from the customer what we want to hear, or that which supports our own biases.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's the same kind of idea, right?
Yes.
You get trapped in that.
Yes. And that you also hit another passionate point of mine. So often the people who are talking to users are product managers. If it's a startup, it's the founder, and it's great. That's happening more and more. You see the purview of a researcher with a white lab coat, and it's great that it's happening more with more people. The thing about founders and product managers is that a product manager in particular is the boss of nobody, right? The reason they're good at their job is they're charismatic, they're great evangelists, they can get people to do stuff with only influence, no actual authority. And so then they take that and they go out into the world and they say, hey, what do you think of this? And what do you say? You say, I think that's great. So not just confirmation bias, but there's subtle things like if I hand you if I'm doing a study with you and I say, shuffling my stuff, I'm going to hand you my drink. If you could just hold it for a minute while I get out this picture. And then I take the drink back and I show you the picture. If I hand you a warm drink, or if I hand you a cold drink, has an impact on your response to this study, which is reacting to a human face. So we definitely need people out there in the world talking to people. They do suffer from confirmation bias, and more than that, they just need, it's not rocket science, but they need a little bit of training to learn how to have those conversations so that they take off their persuasive hats and they're really open to learning, and that they perceive success in that setting as learning something they didn't know instead of proving that they were right.
Right. Yeah, well, and we know at Gallup, sometimes the way you ask the question.
Absolutely.
Right. And we spend an enormous amount of time testing our questions to make sure they're valid and they're getting at what they're trying to get to. And sometimes if we have developers asking the questions, of course, they don't mean to do this. But they begin to ask them in ways where they're going to get the response back that kind of meets the preconceived. I kind of want it to be this way. The role of quality, when we think about quality in design, sometimes designers, I work with designers all the time. And sometimes I get the feeling it's judge, jury, and all wrapped in one. What's the role when we think about quality in design? What's the role of a quality team with designers? And in other words, where do they get involved, or how should they be involved in this to make sure that those components are getting a second look from somebody else as well within the team in a QA role?
In a QA role. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. We sometimes work with business leaders and not designers and ask them the question in a workshop setting, what do you dislike the most about designers? And 9 out of 10 times the answer is perfectionism. They're too slow, they're perfectionists. And so designers need to be aware of that and own it and think about it. I think we need to think about that. On the other hand, if you've got a design team, you're paying money, or you've got a design vendor, you're giving them money, then that goes through development, whether it's waterfall or agile or wagile or whatever it is. You want to know that what you got out at the end is reasonably close to what you paid for in the first place, which, by the way, is supposed to be the thing that's best for the user. So, we do ask and hope to be involved in UAT or QA, and we do. In that case, we do what design teams should do is you just plug in with the QA team. You file bugs in the same system that they file bugs in. We'll do a red line, and we'll say, because short of perfectionism, we are going to see things that a designer or a QA person is not going to see. And so we can say, look, this is all supposed to line up down the page, and it's wonky, and that's going to create some friction, cognitive friction that we just like to remove. And it's easy for you guys to fit. And then it can be a conversation where Dev goes, look, you guys are so picky and it's going to take me a month to fix this. Or really, is it that important? And hopefully it is that conversation. Or, oh, yeah, I didn't notice that. Cool, I can fix it.
Right. And I think of it in an area where because we've gotten compartmentalized, where you may have certain designers work on certain elements of a page or even of a site or even of an app. And one is not seeing the other's work. And then when it's all put together and it runs through a quality component to be like, oh, did we get all the element rights? Or are the two design elements meshing together? Do you find that happening very much, where you may have two designers coming at the same thing, they're coming at it differently, but their designs are going to be meshed together?
I think less often. We're more and more designing in systems. Okay. We're designing lifestyle guides, which have code in them. But to your point, I think what I do see happen more often is the better we get at designing systems, the fewer actual pages we design, right?
Yeah.
Like we're designing key workflows. Like, okay, there's these 10 things that we really they're really important because they're really frequent or they're really urgent. So we're going to do all that work. And then we're going to make a system, and then the developers know that there's more pages, but they know what the key page types are. They've got their component library. They're going to put it together. And then when it comes out the end, we might go, oh, we forgot to say that the padding here should be this. Or when you put all these things together in this way, it's not working. And then hopefully what we're doing is that two things are happening. One is we're seeing how it looks when it gets put back together. And then secondly, we're refactoring the design system so that it solves that problem, right? We don't just fix it on that page. There's so much more work that in theory, design system is building the design system in the first place is buying the razor, but then keeping it updated is the blades. Like it's a lot more work over a long time. And hopefully that happens.
I asked art or science, and actually a lot in design, there's a lot of engineering, and sometimes, engineering those systems to make sure the design doesn't go sideways on itself outside of the system that it's been created. I think we kind of miss sometimes that design can have an architectural structure to it, right?
Absolutely.
Behind the scenes, an engineering component to it that's very regimented and very standardized across it, and then all those. Then some of those other components, because it goes well beyond a button, right? It goes well beyond if it's green or red. To your point that you made in there, the one of the things in Agile now, we've kind of seemingly have been given permission to change rapidly. One of the things I think that's caused in the market is that we're seeing physical landscapes of whether it's apps or sites or whatever change very rapidly on the users. To your perfectionist comment, when I wrote code for a living, my code a week ago was not as good as it is today. And I would always say it's crap. I hear designers say that even about their own stuff. They've created it a month or two later. Oh no, we got to change that. Sometimes that creates jarring effects to the customer, because you might get a site a customer uses a lot for business, or they've written their own user documentation to help with your site, and then the company changes it on them, right? What kind of recommendations do you give in design to kind of slow that jarring, hey, let's not change everything? And I think sometimes, like, musicians get sick of their own music after a week or two, but the public isn't. I think designers can move a little too fast on their own designs. In other words, we did that a couple of weeks ago. It needs to be different now. But the users have just seen it for the first time. So how do you recommend? I mean, what do you recommend to kind of ease that in, knowing there's users on the back end that just got used to this and now you want to change it again?
I think that's a really, really important question. And especially, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? It's one thing in B2C, right? Like, oh, I'm changing the Tinder interaction of swiping, like whatever, who cares? But B2B, I spend 4 or 6 or 8 hours a day, every day, using this thing. And it's a utility. I'm not using it for fun. Hopefully it's pleasurable to use.
And I'm getting paid based on some of the metrics that I can do in this app, right? It gets that serious. B2C, generally not the case, although it has its own problems. But B2B, you might have somebody getting paid based on what they're doing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, well, and that can go too far, right? I think the like extreme example of that is Bloomberg Terminal, which people's like whole egos are associated with the fact that they can use this thing. And they don't want it to change.
And find things fast.
Yeah.
Right.
So there has to be a kind of a range from like, I learned how to use this thing and you're changing it on me every day. And that's not reasonable to like, my ego is associated with my ability to use this really complicated thing. But I think you're right. We need to be thoughtful in B2B. And that a lot of that work goes hand in hand with the marketing, sales, and support teams. So it's not designers operating in a bubble, but letting those folks know that the change is coming, or even getting their feedback before the change and having a plan for rolling the change out. I also think that a lot of our energy, if it's just perfectionist energy being spent, that we need to consider design debt, just like developers consider technical debt, and say, not that it needs to change, but like, so we have this calendar with.
Oh, sorry.
That's probably great.
Maybe that was bad design to have the Jenga model right next to the interview station. But sorry, I should have warned you. Falling Jenga blocks.
Well, as long as we're not injured.
I think we're okay. Yes.
So letting those people know that it's coming, working with them, but then also that we don't spend enough time, in my opinion, looking back at the design debt that we build up over time. And instead of like, hey, we got this new thing, or we're going to update that page that I just designed yesterday, like, let's look at the system as a whole. Let's do usability research, so that it's not my perspective, like, oh, this thing is lame and now it should have rounded corners or whatever. But it's not me. It's poor Mary who's stuck using this thing all day, every day. And you just moved her cheese.
Could there be, or should there be, some thought into leading the user along? So if you're going to make a big wholesale change in design, I find this in my banking apps all the time. By the way, the banking apps have gotten really good, but I'm finding that when they make a change, like, it's gone. It used to be here, and now I've got to spend some time, some capital finding it again. Or where do I go? Well, the numbers showed no one was using that, so I'm just going to move it. And then it's like, hey, wait a minute, I was still using it.
You were the 0.1% that was using that thing.
But is there a middle ground to say, hey, let's bring people, even though we want to make a change, let's bring people there over time so that we're making these changes in a logical way that makes sense to bring them along. So it's just not, the page is gone, you have to go there. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Google does a really good job of this. Actually, their emails updating with some frequency in pretty significant ways. An email is a utility. It's not a game. But they do things like they tell you it's coming. They let you preview that it's coming. They let you switch over on your own. I have a suspicion that they don't decide the switchover date. They actually let people. Now that's for a major update. For a smaller update, we can still use tools from a first-time user experience. So we call that FTUX. And there are little tools like hint bubbles, right? And in some ways, this is the first time that you're using your banking app because some stuff has moved around. And so some kind of proactive messaging before it happens is great if it's a major change. But if it's already done, it's easy to build. It's easy to design these little things. And again, it's that like user research thing that helps you remember, designer or developer that works on and thinks about this banking app all day, every day. Oh yeah, this was there 5 years ago. And there's some people in the world that use it every day. And that outside perspective is invaluable. And you can't fake it.
It's hard. This is hard work. And I think sometimes we approach it as when the code is done, it's done. And the human experience is, I think, the most important experience in this. And you can fake your users out. And then they'll move, right? Oftentimes it's not their only options. They can do something different. So I love the bubbles. I'm beginning to see on a lot of pages now a little flashing, like when there's more information below, little flashing arrows, little hints. Hey, there's probably more down there. Or one of my favorites is, we've changed some things. Do you want a quick overview or quick tour of the things that we've changed right in the experience. So we
Yes.
kind of get a
Yes.
kind of a walkthrough, right, of the things that have changed.
Not a modal that's
Yeah.
like, hello, you can't do anything now because I have something so important to tell you.
Yeah, this is not the site that you were looking for,
Yeah.
kind of thing. You know, these Jedi mind tricks. Oh, they'll just get used to it, or they'll find it, or the design is so good it should just be found. Well, there's some training maybe associated with it that needs to be taken care of, right?
Marty Kagan says help should always be available and never be necessary.
Yeah, no, right on. And I love the idea of bringing people along, making small changes over time to kind of get them. I think Windows to the Windows 10 is kind of a version of every 6 months, small little changes being made. A little bit at a time. It's hard. It's kind of turning the water up, right? Turn the temperature of the water up slowly over time.
Are we all boiling frogs in this
I don't know. It's never a good example. That's why I didn't say boiling frogs. It's never a good example. Well, thank you for taking the time. I've taken a little more than I probably should have.
No,
but
it's my pleasure.
Thanks for coming to do this. And thanks for coming and speaking, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, I was glad to be here.
Yeah. We'll be back with more interviews during the day here through. So if you just look down on the page there's more videos below this one available for you. And we'll be back. Thanks for watching.
There's your hints. Look down.
Yeah, look down. That's